Okay, so one way to implement this function is to realize that the length of a vector is the square root of the dot product of that vector with itself. So we could try to use the function LAFF dot of x comma x, which takes the inner product of the vector with itself. And what would we want to do? We would want to do that and then assign to alpha the square root of that. And computing the square root in Matlab is done by this function sqrt. So let's save this. And then we have this function. And now what we can do is create a vector. Say the vector with entries 1, 2, 3. And then we can compute the length of it. And notice that Matlab itself has a function norm of x that also returns the length of a vector. So these two answers appear to be the same, but if we check whether they are the same using the isEqual function, how would we do that? We would call this right here and compare it to the result if we use Matlab's function. What we notice is that the return value of that is 0, which indicates that it's false. They're not equal. Now what's going on there? Well, if we look at the difference between these two, we find out that there actually is a very, very tiny difference between the two numbers. E to the minus 16 means 10 to the minus 16. So this is a very, very small number. This is due to the fact that computers use floating point arithmetic, and when you perform computations with floating point arithmetic, small round-off errors occur along the way. If you don't use the exact same formula for computing the quantity, then you may end up with a tiny difference like that. So this is all acceptable. Now I created a script that tests the norm2 function, so we can say test norm2. And what we notice is that we've got a problem. Now what's the problem here? Well, as part of the script, we tried to call the routine with a vector x that wasn't really a vector. And what happens then is that within the LAFF dot function it detects that it's not a vector. It returns then the string failed, and then when it returns the string failed, then you cannot take the square root of the result of that, and that's what all of this is complaining about. So what we really need to do here is say, if it's not the case that x is a vector, then we set alpha equal to failed, and we return. And if we save that, then we can run our test norm2, and it passes all of the tests. Now notice that the test script reports that the test may fail due to round-off, and it then prints out the two results. So in this particular case, it's a little harder to test whether the two results were identical. Now we could have implemented this function differently. We could have actually put the loop for computing the dot product explicitly in the function and then taken the square root of the result of that.